and the Wendat. Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. So I'm very happy to be here today. My name is David Huynh. My pronouns are he, his, him, and I'm a Vietnamese Canadian raised in Toronto. I'm a graduate of the University of Waterloo School of Planning, class of 2002. That seems like so long ago. And I'm a practicing professional land use planner and currently a partner at Bellsfields Incorporated, a planning, design, and community engagement consulting firm with the offices in Toronto and Hamilton. I joined Bellsfields back in 2004 as a junior planner and worked my way up to becoming a partner, which I feel is really rare these days. Um, in terms of being at a company for 20 years now, because I'll have just celebrated my 20th year in at Bellsfields, and I've been in planning for about 21 years. So it just tells you how long I've been at Bellsfields. Um, maybe what I'll do now is talk about how I got into planning. Um, excuse me. I didn't always want to be a planner. I didn't know what planning was, to be perfectly honest with you. I wanted to be an architect first and foremost, and it was in early age of grade 5 that I thought I wanted to be an architect. I was drawing the city's skyline, and my grade 5 teacher at the time, it was indoor recess because it was raining, and he was walking around the desk seeing what kids were doing, and I was drawing the city skyline. He said, "Oh, that's really detailed and that's really nice. And is that what you want to do when you grow up?" And I'm like, "What's that?" And it's like, "An architect. That's what that is." And I'm like, "Yes, I would like to be an architect." And so there started my journey on this path of becoming an architect. And I took classes and just focused everything that I thought I needed to become an architect. And so I enrolled in a number of programs, both at Waterloo and TMU and University of Toronto for architecture. And, I got into them, but while registering for programs, there were a few extra ones that I got to, that I had. And rather than let them go to waste, I kind of said, well, I should, apply for a couple, safety nets, if you will. And so I looked into kind of programs that were adjacent to architecture and landed in on, Waterloo School of Planning and was really interested in the kind of description of the program and the various classes that you would take and quickly realized that it wasn't architecture that I wanted to do. It was actually planning that I wanted to do. And, it was never about the building, but how the building fit or sit, within the context and what it took to kind of get to, for that building to, be where it is and all and all that process. And so I very much became more interested in a more macro look at things and not so much focusing on, one particular building, but how all the buildings kind of relate to one another. And so it was very late, very late in my high school kind of career, if you call it, or high school education, where I realized that I actually wanted to get into planning, and then going to Waterloo was the most gratifying and satisfying decision I ever made. And there I have established lifelong friends and colleagues now that work in the same field and industry and profession that I've built these relationships from those early days. And that really is probably the most beneficial thing that I've gained out of Waterloo is those relationships that I can leverage and I can lean on when I am sitting across the table from a fellow alumnus and can relate to them, and we have the same educational background and same experiences that we can all relate to, and it helps further discussions and our own kind of agendas when it comes to our line of work. So that's kind of me in a quick nutshell. I'll pause there, and happy to take, more any initial questions based on that. Happy to go into more details about, my experience at Waterloo, and what I gained out of it. I'm happy to talk about my work at Bousfields and what we do as a company, and what I do at the company. Happy to talk about initiatives that I do outside of my work. What's my passion in terms of planning, and what I want planning to become. I'm happy to kind of go anywhere any the group wants to go.
It's a very exciting moment, folks. We can take this in so many directions. So yeah, please let us know in the chat, or feel free to come off of mute and ask any questions while we're paused here. Just because I'm a curious cat, I want to know, David. Um, were there were there any moments throughout your undergrad where you, and I'm sure I can already answer this question for myself as a yes, but where you expected it to be one thing and then you realized, oh, like this is a bit different than what I thought, or you're learning something that you about planning that you never anticipated, or yeah, any moments that kind of changed your perspectives or pivoted you in a different direction?
Yeah, many times, many times. Like I said, I, came into planning quite late in terms of not doing any research really whatsoever as to really what planning was or is. Because I had kind of again focused primarily going into architecture. So to me, planning was architecture adjacent. And so I really leaned into urban design as what I thought I really wanted to specialize in. And urban design, and if for those that can kind of appreciate how old I am, was really an up and coming kind of profession or offshoot of planning. And the focus was moving towards kind of a design oriented process when it comes to planning. And so, Waterloo was cutting edge at the time and introducing an urban design kind of stream. By no means was it a specialization. But at the same time, there was a lot of classes focusing in on urban design. So I leaned in a lot into urban design because I think, like I said, I thought that that was what um, was my interest. And it definitely was an interest throughout school. And but I quickly came to appreciate all the other programs and that or classes and sessions that were being offered. And I'm looking back now, I don't do urban design as my main practice. I would say I'm urban design adjacent is probably where I would, as a consulting firm, we have urban designers. So you have to kind of know the lingo and kind of appreciate all that it is. But my primary focus is or specialization is land use planning, and there is a land use planning course that you can take, and at the time I took it, and I was really I excelled at it, but I didn't think that's where I was ultimately going to land, and so it's interesting to kind of look back and say, maybe I should have focused a little bit more or taken a few more classes, but it just tells you that at the end of the day, um, at Waterloo, you get so much experience and so much exposure to different courses and different types of planning that, you'll easily find your way because there's so many options. Planning is so wide ranging and it touches upon so much aspects of not just development, but community building in general that you can easily find what fits for you.
Yeah, and I know when I was a student, seeing a job title versus knowing what that actually meant day to day, and how that applied and connected with the course that we're taking was, yeah, very different. And so that's why it's so great to have alums like you come on and tell us, like, what does it actually mean to do what you do? Um, so thank you for that. And I'm just gonna change the view to gallery because I see quite a few questions coming in, and I think it might just be um, a nicer sort of let's sit around as sit together as a group and take the conversation where it needs to go. But and thank you for everyone that's been putting questions in the chat. Some questions um, about starting your career in planning and maybe coming from a non-planning educational background and how you can find that connection. But how about let's just start with the question about co-op, because we were just talking about your time at Waterloo. And yeah, if you could just speak to a little bit about your co-op experience um, and yeah, and how that maybe you leverage those placements for your first role, or yeah, did they align? Did they not align?
Yeah, maybe I'm not the one that answered this question because, you know, when I went to school, co-op wasn't a mandatory thing. And there was two streams that which you can go into planning. You can go into the regular stream or the co-op stream. And I ultimately chose to stay in the regular stream. So I did, my program was only 4 years. And I had friends and colleagues in the co-op stream, and at some point they offshooted and kind of did their co-op streams, and eventually we overlapped in some terms, but there were the ones that ultimately finished a little bit later. But nonetheless, knowing that I was in the regular stream and not in the co-op stream, it did give a sense of a level of competitiveness that I needed to appreciate. And knowing that I didn't have available to me the co-op program and the offerings of job placements, or at least the ability to apply for job placements, really kind of kicked my butt into gear and made me force me to kind of be more proactive in trying to find work in my off terms in the summer, to find that experience and kind of, yeah, try to find those opportunities. And so I ended up doing I'd say summer terms at the Ministry of Transportation, and using that experience to kind of be exposed to kind of more professional setting, but also to kind of be, again, doing work that was somewhat in my field, and just kind of just being exposed really at the end of the day. And so all I really took from those placements was just how to act, how to act professional, how to deal with just, the challenges of, a structure that you have a boss, you have coworkers, but also to kind of understand the type of work that, I would be doing as, a summer intern, but also being very mindful of what other people were doing on a day-to-day basis and what their roles and titles were. Um, and just kind of, you know, whether I was doing the work with them or just being next to them, understanding the different roles and responsibilities that, make up, a department, and what makes it work, because that gives you a lot of insight in terms of, what it takes to kind of do not only your work, but the work of others to kind of work towards one common thing.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. And I think maybe helpful or a hopeful message as well for folks who might not have been in co-op or aren't in co-op, you can still get a job. And it's also about, yeah, you can how you use maybe your summers off or leverage those course projects. And yeah, so that was really great. Thank you, David. And just what you're touching on about sort of the people in your department or the people that you're interacting with in your workforce, I feel like is a good tie-in to some of the questions in the chat about maybe not coming from a planning background, but wanting to work in the planning space. And maybe you could speak to, who are those people that you might interact with in your work who are non-planners, but are support like in the planning profession or in the development community building space.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, you don't, to be a planner, even to be in the planning profession, you don't need to be have gone to a planning school, although I would say that, that obviously helps you focus in on your skill set and gives you a range of courses that kind of expose you to the various types of planning. But, a lot planners gain their experience and their educations in multiple ways. We have, colleagues that, took geography, for example, or environmental research studies and, found their way to planning because there are so many connections, in that way. And I do land use planning, but there's many forms of planning as well. There's environmental planning. So if you're focused in on, the environmental kind of sustainability and that connection with environment to the built form and those synergies, there is a way, there is a path there for you as well. And that's not to say that you work for municipalities and conservation authorities, which are kind of your more typical things, but you can work for consulting firms. I worked at a consulting firm, an engineering firm that had a planning section that was connected to the environmental section. So there was a lot of dialogue between all those disciplines and towards, a singular project where there was multiple disciplines kind of plugging into that. And so yeah, there's definitely multiple ways you can get into planning and into development and industry. I mean, as a working in the development side of things, for example, many people come from business side and go and have MBAs and go to business school and take a development course or development courses there and learn about performas and learn about the numbers and cents, the dollars and cents of it all in terms of what makes a project viable. And, they take that experience and, as a planner, I take that and say, okay, well, that's what, you need. And this is what I can, support as a planner, based on my interpretation of policy and looking and listening to, engineers and architects and environmental planners. And, these are the constraints and here are the opportunities. So you very much, you very much can move around in the development space quite easily. And then lastly, like just to kind of give you another breadth of like the type of planning where, some people come at it, on the social side of things. And are social planners or community engagement specialists. And so it's about just as much about making connections with people as it is about making connections, in the physical sense. So a lot of people come with educations on psychology and whatnot to kind of understand the human side of things. And more now today, you know, do we realize that there is this synergy and this connection between the built form, the environment, and humans and all that plays into what I would say is a complete community. We shouldn't just think about it on in one singular kind of aspect of things.
That's such an important part, and one that I also didn't realize or wasn't as aware of until I started talking to more planners about it's, the built environment, but how do people and communities interact with the built environment? That's a really cool component. And I just want to take another question from the chat, and then maybe Perrin, we can have you come on and ask your question. Thank you for being patient, by the way. And just because we're talking about different ways to get into planning, and I think this question fits well with that. And that, what are some of the most valuable skills that maybe you've acquired or that you learned during your time at Waterloo that have allowed you to, you know, would allow people to either break into the planning field or that you've been able to really leverage to your advantage?
Yeah, I would say that um I was like in terms of my first job, I was willing to kind of do anything and everything and just be exposed to as much and be as much of a sponge and be in the in as evolved in as many projects as possible. And that was probably easy as working at a consulting firm because then you get exposed to so many different projects. So, my experience at Waterloo, what does that mean? That just means like I was always open to taking as many courses as possible, even though I was, um, you know, focused on urban design. I took land use planning and again, ultimately landed there. But I took, GIS course, I took environmental, and I know a lot of these are mandatory courses and you got to take them. But to kind of, obviously sit in them and appreciate them, in retrospect, there's probably a couple courses I probably should have paid attention more to. But, I really was ultimately just, and partly it's because I didn't know what planning was and I was trying to find my way. And I was really just open to it all and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Um, so, that would be an advice that I'd have is just, if you don't know what you want to do yet, it's just kind of be open to everything and anything. Planning is such that it's so broad and that you can easily find your way. Some might take longer than others, but even at our firm, Bousfields, again, we have our planning kind of, our firm started as a planning firm, doing a lot of greenfield development. But we evolved. We quickly realized that intensification was the more sustainable way to kind of grow up versus grow out. And we focused in on urban design as a firm, and we introduced that as a service. And that is kind of we reaped a lot of benefits in becoming a leader of in the planning field in that respect. And then being open to change and seeing change. Our firm in 2018 started our community engagement practice. And again, just a kind of an appreciation of the changing planning landscape to, be more about communication and consultation in the human side of things. And so adaptability is definitely something that is important because anyone following, all the provincial changes over the last 5 years, um, being adaptable and quick is the quickest way to success, quite frankly, because if you can adapt quickly, then you're going to be in a better position to make those adjustments. Because what I would say about the real world is that change happens a lot and it can happen quite frequently, especially in planning where we're so um, our planning system is policy based and it's controlled or run by the province in the sense of laying down policy downward and down to the municipalities in terms of a direction. And so we very much respond to those policy objectives that come at us, and the political landscape is such that it happens on a 4-year cycle. So whatever the mandate of that government that comes in and however long they hold on to power, those are the rules of engagement, so to speak. So yeah, adaptability is definitely something that comes to mind.
I would just echo that. Yeah. The world is one of much change, and that's, yeah, a really good skill to have. Thank you again, Perrin, and and our other student, I can't see your name, but you show up as administrator for being patient. Perrin, can we start with you if you want to come on and ask your question, and then we'll go to our other student.
Sure, thank you. It's nice to see David again. We actually used to work together back in undergrad and in the Federation Orientation Committee years ago.
Yes, Perrin. Nice to see you.
Yeah.
Or nice to hear from you.
Yeah. So yeah, it was nice to see your name pop up and to hear your story. I mean, we have, some intersections in our work and in, the kind of, our sort of career trajectory in some respects in that, we both kind of started young in our interests in things like kind of urban planning. And I'm writing a PhD now that's sort of related to urban science. You started to answer my question a little bit. So I was going to ask you to just sort of elaborate on the sort of your interpretation of, kind of the changing nature of, the field and, especially related to like growth pressures and sustainability. But then in addition to that, like what do you see then as like the relationship between practice, research, and education? And if you do you think that, the academic world is sort of responding quickly enough to the world of practice?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say that, there's always a bit of a lag. And I think it's a lag on either end of things. A lot of the times I would say academia is leading edge in terms of really setting the foundation and setting the expectations for, our you know, incoming professionals or incoming graduates to kind of appreciate or really set the tone of what expectations that they have or should have for whatever profession or career that they want to get into. So I really feel that sometimes academia can be that leading edge and pushing forward agendas and ways of thinking that sometimes industries and professions get kind of aren't accustomed to because they get into this natural kind of groove about how things are and this is how things should be. And it really takes a nice jolt to kind of have people think about it. And, the perfect example is just the makeup of graduating classes now more so than ever in the planning world is so diverse that, it really creates new expectations and I think expectations for the better. Um, because they, graduating classes, as diverse as they are, they come with different expectations, and so should they. So that's something that I think about, when I meet new graduates and I want to know them, and I want to get to know what drives them. I think a lot of that comes from the teachings that that from their various courses and their programs that they've gone through. On the other end, I think that industry and professions can be are also leading edge as well because they're on the grounds adapting to, again, all these policy changes and, leveraging and finding, new ways, whether they be through technologies or different approaches on really how to kind of make the adjustments to not only expectations that may be coming from quote unquote the newer generation or the new ways of thinking, but also from any other pressures that are coming, whether they be policy or whether they just be, quite frankly, just um the environmental pressures or any other type of kind of real pressures that we have to deal with on a going forward basis. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I would just say that again, going back to that adaptability, statement, I think it's just something that as a planner myself, I'm always kind of being forced to kind of, you know, lean in on new areas of expertise and finding new ways to do, an old way. There's always more information that's being asked of us. And we're having to, really be as adaptive as possible. Like just as an example, when we used to submit when I started off in planning, submitting an application was pretty basic, a set of architectural plans, maybe a couple studies. But they were more or less kind of just high level studies just to make sure that, yeah, you weren't doing anything that was going to be too off base. Now the requirements to submit are um, so long in terms of the types, the number of reports, but also the reports themselves are so specific in terms of like analyzing, you know, um, to the nth degree, the shadow impact over, a certain period of time and a certain time of year, that granular level of, just as an example of something like shadows, but also looking at traffic, and like it's so precise now. We're not just looking at cars now, we're looking at bikes, we're looking at pedestrian movements. We're really expanding, the ideas of what transportation is. And, from the environmental side, we think about, just how a building operates and what it gives back, in terms of carbon to a building. And we're looking at not only kind of after the fact, but while you're constructing and while you're demolishing and all those impacts. So everything is becoming much more precise, and it requires you to be very attentive in that respect.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Our next student with their hand raised, would you like to come on? And I apologize, don't know your name.
No, that's okay. My name is Aisha, and I suppose my question was very similar in scope to parents, but I can rephrase a little bit. So I would ask how active you are in the research and academia space, and what are some gaps that you think that, as planners, we ought to address or do more to address. And I guess you can answer that first, and I have a follow-up for that.
Yeah, I'm not very active in the kind of academia space, to be perfectly honest with you. I'm a, practicing professional planner at a consulting firm, and that takes a lot of my energies and focus. But, I would say though, like for those that are, on the more academic side, is really, planning is about connections.
Mhm.
In as much as it is about your own discipline, and so, I would say that, in your kind of further exploration of, how planning can be very effective is how it can really make those connections and be better connected to various systems. And so focusing, your studies or your thesis or whatever you're doing is really just kind of maybe exploring how planning be connected in that way. And, like just as an example, like, I think, our practice here, we have, again, planning, urban design, and community engagement, and the relationships, our three sections, work with each other on a daily basis, and how we translate that to advice that we give our clients, and how they can achieve, what they're trying to achieve, that is a microcosm of really a system that goes even beyond just what we do as a practice, because we have to communicate with the community. We have to communicate with our, municipal counterparts, or our public sector counterparts. And we have to deal with our own clients that are kind of in the development side, and they have, business aspirations and banks. And so, there's a system here that all kind of gets interconnected. And so I think the more you can appreciate how planning fits into it, and how you can really, be more of an active kind of participant in those other parts of the system and be more aware of it, I think, you're going to be, I think you're going to find a lot of success. But also in terms of your own work, you'll be able to, I think, open up a lot of possibilities on how planning can really evolve, to not just be about, you know, the buildings and
Exactly.
and whatnot, but how what it takes for that building and what is its life after the fact, right? Because
Hmm.
people that are going to move into it or work in it, right? And what is the life beyond that? So, appreciating all of that is really um what I think is missing sometimes, because we kind of don't appreciate all the things in the past and all the things in the future as much as we should. Because as planners, we do, and we're supposed to, but it's a difficult thing to kind of look too far back and too far in the future, because then you just get caught in this abyss. So really developing an approach that I think fits into it will really be an effective thing for planning, I think.
Right, right. That's a very I think that's a very great point. Personally, I am coming from more of the interaction between the built and the natural environment side of things, and kind of focusing more on like the water aspect of things. So, um, I think currently there's not a whole lot out there in terms of that connection. So that's something I'm looking to explore. So thank you. And my other question was that I know you said you're not really active in that space, but does it is it a- applied a lot in terms of practice? Do you kind of borrow from things that are already out there in terms of research? So how does that show up in your work that you do?
Yeah, I think it does, in the sense that it happens in a couple ways, I would say. Um, you know, One is, as a consulting firm, we really pride ourselves in kind of knowledge sharing and really learning from others. So, we have a knowledge committee in our firm, and which their sole purpose is to find ways of broadening our own horizons and really connecting with other professionals and other, outside of planning or within planning, and learning about where's that connection with planning. So a lot of the times we do bring in academics, not just practicing professionals, and it really pushes, I think, us to kind of think differently in terms of like what is to come, or what was their kind of thesis on, and really how can we apply, as interesting of a topic that is, how can we apply that to the real world, or how can we apply that to practice. And so it's really through those avenues that we are being exposed to kind of that. And what our interest is not so much taking that research and doing more research with
Mm,
it, but really thinking about its application. And it may be too cutting edge, or maybe too broad in the moment, because we're so focused on the practicality of it. But it does allow, there is a trickle effect that, if you stay constant with it, and if there is interest in it, we kind of focusing on it, and see how it can ultimately be applied. So, my advice to you in terms of your research is, think about the practical side of it, and how can it be applied to the everyday, because that is where the success will be, is how far-fetching is it, or how actually
mm.
attainable is it, that someone can adopt it quite quickly into their own practice or their own work, and you leverage your research effectively that way.
Right, right. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, thank you so much for answering my questions, David. Yeah.
So much. Matthew, I see your hand up. Would you like to come on and ask your question?
Yeah. Hey, so I was wondering what the process was for you to find your current position. Like, did you just apply? Did you know someone at the company, or did you talk to alumni that recommended you uh, to the current position?
All of the above is what I would say. Coming out of school, fun fact, I actually decided to take the summer off, and I just needed a little bit of a break. And yeah, I just kind of did odd jobs here and there, but then eventually got into applying once the kind of summer came. I felt the need again because I was coming from the regular stream. I needed to find an edge, a little bit of a competitive edge, and so being a creative thinker, I with my resume, I submitted it with a shoe, and a shoe with a note on it that said, "Now that I have my foot in the door, how about giving me a chance?" And so I was very much trying to be very thoughtful and creative on how to kind of get noticed. And I didn't have the benefit of a broad kind of network, which is probably recommendation number one is kind of building your network, whether it's through the co-op or whether it's your own kind of efforts. It just doesn't have to be work related. It's amazing what a network of friends and colleagues will do for you in the grand scheme of things. Because they may know people, and if they know people, they can make connections with you. And so when I found my job, uh, I was already working at another consulting firm. Um, the chance of this opening came about. So the way it came about was someone at this company left and moved to Kitchener, and my friend and colleague was working at that Kitchener firm and said to me, "Hey, there's this opening over here in Toronto that I know you're looking for work and you should apply there." And so that's that's why I applied. And that's kind of how it all happened. So it wasn't through any kind of apply, but just knowing a friend that was just happened to be working at a place that that person was joining and having left that one, right? And so that's kind of how I got this job. And then yeah, just meeting with the people at Bellsfields and just kind of really making a connection in terms of what my interests were and lining up with what they were offering as a job, and really obviously demonstrating to them that I was more than capable of it. I like to think that it all worked out in the end because I'm a partner here, but I was very fortunate that way. It's just it would definitely wasn't by chance, because again, you make those connections and those networks. So that would be my kind of suggestion or advice is build your network, and it doesn't necessarily need to be just pounding the pavement and meeting managers and partners and whatnot. It really just meeting people of your own your own kind of skill set and experience. Talk to your professors, see if they have any alums that you can have a discussion with. It really is just kind of, and it's easier said than done because I was that shy, fourth year student trying to kind of sit in the corner but wanting to talk to people. But it takes some courage and some vulnerability to kind of put yourself out there and just say hi. And just again, just say hi and say what your interests are, and that's it.
So follow up on that. So I'm also a recent graduate, and I did similar to what you did. I took the spring off and now looking for jobs, and it's rough. How would you recommend going about building that network after graduating?
No, that's definitely good question. Now, I would lean on the alumni office here. I'm sure that they have lots of whether they have planned events or again whether they have a network of alumnus that can connect you to other events. I would suggest reaching out to your fellow students, whether they have work or not, because again, connecting with them opens their network to you. And that is the best way. Because again, like I say about my job here at Bellsfields, it wasn't because I was actively looking to work at Bellsfields. It was because I was told by a friend that was also a junior planner that there was an opening over here, and that's how it came to be. Now, interesting enough, that planner that was working in the Kitchener office is now a fellow partner here at Bellsfields as well. And her and I are dear friends, but great colleagues. But it was because of that relationship and that network that we are now partners together at this firm. So those relationships definitely go a long way. So and what that does, in terms of like, what does that mean? Like, your friends and colleagues or reaching out to the alumni office might open the door for some young professional events that you can join, you can participate in and attend. And again, that might open the doors for a chance to kind of talk to people. I'd also encourage you to, join, different organizations or whatnot, like Urban Land Institute, for example, is an organization that focuses, primarily on, urban development. But they have a lot of events where you're connected in with professionals, and I think they have a student arm as well that you can become a student member in and participate and join in all those events. So, again, it takes a little bit of courage to kind of put yourself out there. And I'm not saying it's an easy feat because it can be difficult. But just meeting people and I would say, because you're right, it's a difficult now, so more than ever. I like just myself hiring staff. There's a lot out there. There's a lot to pick from in terms of for employee, for hopeful employees and employers. So you can at one end you can be quite strategic on what you want to do, but at the other end, there's just the planning is so popular these days that I appreciate the competition that is out there. So just to kind of find a way to meet as many people and I know it's easier said than done in terms of patience level, but that is how you kind of get connected.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Theo, I can just chime in here from an advancement perspective and some of the resources available through the university. For those of you who don't know, all alumni have access to services through CEE, a co-op. So that could mean resume building, help, interview prep. You also have access to, I want to say it's 3 career counseling sessions for free, and all this is for free. And also LinkedIn Learning courses. You have access through that. And then another organization that you might be interested in, Matthew, is the UW UW Planning Alumni organization. I just checked, and so they're doing their very first young planning alumni social this summer in July, but the tickets are sold out. So keep your eyes out for future events there. But obviously coming to these alumni office hour sessions is a great way to connect with alums. And through 10,000 Coffees, our mentorship platform, that's a great way to connect with peers and other alums as well. But yeah, stay tuned on through your email, and if you are an alum, you'd be getting emails from us. Make sure that we have your information, because we do host events through for our faculty, but then also I'll see if I can put another link in the chat. The university has chapters in various cities, so depending where you are, there could be a social happening in your area, and that's a great way to connect with alums from any and all university programs, and a great way to broaden your network there. But thank you so much for your question, and good luck with the job hunt.
Thank you. I'll check out the link.
Maybe one advice I'd give you in terms of, in terms of putting out, resumes and covering letters attached to those resumes is, you know, what we look for in a candidate, you know, that's coming out of school is, again, I said this earlier, is one that's just willing to kind of do everything and anything, and really demonstrating in your covering letter and your resume that kind of that willingness to really you know, be as much of a sponge and learn as much as you can, appreciating that it's your first kind of big kind of job out of graduating, is something that we look for in a successful candidate. Is, again, someone that is willing to kind of, you know, you know, you'll go to school, you'll have your courses, you will kind of focus in on those courses and kind of accentuate that in your resumes and your covering letter. And I think some of the problems that come up about that sometimes is that then you become so focused, or at least the way that that letter might be written is kind of leading or misleading to suggest that that's what you're really interested in, when all really at the end of the day is, I'm sure that you're just looking for a good experience, a good place to land and be able to kind of further develop your skill set, and, take your education and where you focus in and be able to apply that. So, I would suggest to you is when you're writing your covering letters, just to make sure that, you demonstrate that there's a willingness to kind of learn what that place of employment offers as work, and do the research to kind of know what they do, and should demonstrate to that potential employer of how you can best leverage your own kind of education and experience to what they do.
Thanks. I'll keep that in mind.
Thanks, David. I see we're coming up on the hour, and just want to give everyone an opportunity to ask any questions that they had. I know you were touching, David, a little bit on some of the networks and resources that one might want to tap into. That was one of the questions in the chat that I hadn't explicitly asked yet from Putri, so thank you so much for sharing that question, Putri. But yeah, if there are any other resources for like your own continuous learning journey, or networks that you tap into as a planner, I think that the students would really
Yeah, no,
appreciate that.
I'm a registered professional planner with the Ontario Planning Institute, Professional Planning Institute, OPPI. So, I very much am active in that organization. I've attended a lot of kind of think tank sessions and really learning from my fellow colleagues and peers of, what they're doing, both kind of high level in terms of just broad thinking of planning, and but also the kind of application of it to our everyday work, and really kind of trying to push planning in a more forward-thinking manner. My passion is DEI, so diversity, equity, inclusion, and really uh, ways of kind of having planning evolve into that. So that's where I kind of focus in, and where I lean my passions with respect to how to grow planning. But I also am, a member of the Ontario Land Institute as well. So looking for different organizations that have, that share my interests in terms of how planning can be applied, is something that I do to kind of keep on top of things. Yeah, and then just, I also get my passion a lot from our new staff and meeting young people, because again, they're the ones that are coming out. I feel old saying this, they're our future in terms of, they set the tone in terms of what we, as an employer, what the expectations are, and what challenges us to kind of be better, both not only as an employer, but as a planner. So I very much kind of lean into that as much as I can.
Great, thank you. And for those of you who haven't who didn't see, I did just put the Ontario Planners OPPI site in the chat. So yeah, you can guys check that out. I think there's resources even for non-members as well, if I'm not mistaken, but that's a great network to get connected to for sure. And you started answering a little bit, David, but I wanted to give you a moment to shine a light on all of the things you do outside of your work. Yeah, a chance to, talk about what drives you and your passions beyond. I know you kind of sort of touching on that, but are there any last things you wanted to share with the group before we part ways?
Yeah, no, I mean, again, like I said, my passion, when I came out of school, I would say that people that look like me were definitely in the minority. And so, I had to kind of navigate my career where, I wasn't, I was not the norm, to be perfectly honest with you. And I really much want to see planning where the doors open up much more easily for people of color. And so that's really what drives me, on the kind of, I would say, outside of my own practice in terms of my day-to-day work. But as a partner at a company, in terms of driving change and having the ability to drive change, changing our organization and hopefully changing our profession, conversation by one conversation at a time, and really kind of shedding some light on that and making it more accessible, both the profession, but also just the process.
Yeah.
In terms of, as a resident, that's, gets a notice about an application and doesn't know what to do with it, right? Like just kind of being able to be much more transparent of that process and giving those people the tools to kind of be more participating in that process is something that not only I care about, but our organization cares about. So access is something that really drives me, so.
That. Oh, yes, just little claps. Oh man, thank you so much, David. This has been, very interesting for me. I hope for our students who have kindly joined us today. Before we wrap up, I just want to ask how would be best for students to connect with you following today? If anyone had a question that they think of tomorrow in the shower, how would be best for them to connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, you could probably find me on LinkedIn, probably. That's one. One, you can just go to our company website, bellsfields.ca, and then just go to the team, and then you'll find my mugshot on there, and there's a link to my email address, and that's probably just as easy a way to connect to me. But in terms of your own network, you can connect with me on LinkedIn, and we can always stay connected that way. But yeah, if there's direct questions, feel free to kind of email me, go on the website to find that. You can reach out to Lana. I'm sure she can
Yes.
pass on any questions through that means. But yeah, that would be it. I'm going to be at the Canadian Institute conference next week or 2 weeks from now in Edmonton. If anyone's in Edmonton and wants to sit in on my session, talking about making DEI connections. But feel free to if you're there, hope to be at the OPPI conference. If you're there as a student, you can find me there as well. But yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, David. And yes, you can meet many awesome alums like David at future alumni office hour sessions on our 10,000 Coffees platform. If you're a planner and interested in planning, there's an annual UW-PAT dinner in November that we bus students to, and have a focus session where you can meet Waterloo alums and talk to them. It can be a bit of an overwhelming experience, but that's a great one to look out for. And then, yeah, we're gearing up for a busy fall term. So stay tuned. We will be having got a food truck social plan. So that's a great way to meet some of your fellow peers, faculty, staff, and there'll be more in-person networking sessions as well. So yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for coming out on this gloomy Tuesday and asking so many great questions. And thank you so much, David, for being so generous with your time today and
Well, you're
sharing
very
all of your
welcome.
wisdom.
You're very welcome. And thank you everyone for joining in. It was a lot of fun.
Awesome. All right. Well, take care, everyone. Hope you enjoy the rest of your